A woman in Illinois listed her late father's stereo equipment on Facebook Marketplace in 2024 as a single lot. 6 pieces, all Sony, all from the late 70s and 80s, stacked in a wooden rack in the den. She wrote 3 words in the description: "Old Sony stereo." She asked $150 for everything. A man drove 90 minutes, loaded all 6 pieces into his SUV, and paid without negotiating. One of those pieces was a Sony PSX800 BioTracer, a linear tracking turntable with a moving platter and a fixed tone arm, an engineering approach so unusual that Sony only attempted it twice. It sold on its own 3 weeks later for $1,100. The cassette deck in that same lot went for $600. The family had priced 6 pieces at $150 and lost close to $3,000. That's not bad luck. That's what happens when the word Sony gets read as consumer electronics instead of what it actually meant during a specific 20-year window. There is a category of Sony equipment that has almost nothing in common with the Sony most people picture. Not televisions, not PlayStations, not Walkmans in a junk drawer. During the late 1970s and 1980s, Sony's engineering division built a line of home audio components designed to compete directly with the most expensive audiophile equipment in the world, using technologies nobody else had, in production runs that were often measured in the hundreds. The equipment carries the same brand name as a clock radio. That's the entire problem, and the people who know the difference are not going to explain it while loading your father's stereo rack into their SUV. So here are 10 Sony pieces that look like generic old electronics and sell like serious collector equipment, starting from the bottom and building to the one that could cost more than your car. Number 10. The Sony STJ88B, a standalone FM tuner in a plain black case with a digital frequency display and almost no visual personality whatsoever. Standalone tuners are the single most discarded category in vintage audio because nobody listens to FM radio anymore, and a tuner without an amplifier does nothing on its own. But the STJ88B used a 5-gang tuning capacitor, a quartz-locked PLL synthesizer, and a sensitivity specification that put it among the best FM tuners Sony ever produced. Working units sell for $150 to $400. You'll find one at the bottom of a donation box because the family plugged it in, heard nothing, and assumed it was broken. It wasn't broken, it just needed something to plug into. Number 9. The Sony TCK870ES. A 3-head cassette deck with direct drive, closed-loop dual capstan transport, and Dolby HX Pro alongside B and C noise reduction. The ES badge on the faceplate is the detail that separates this from the dozens of ordinary Sony cassette decks that flooded department stores. ES stood for Elevated Standard, and it was Sony's internal designation for components built with audiophile-grade parts, tighter tolerances, and separate power supply sections. The 870 ES looks like a black rectangle with buttons. Recent listings sit at $779. A standard Sony cassette deck from the same era sells for $30. Same brand, same color, same shape. The difference is 2 letters on the faceplate. Check for them. Number 8. The Sony CDP701ES. Sony's second-generation CD player and the first one built to ES standards. Released in 1983, it used a heavy die-cast chassis, a linear tracking laser assembly, and separate transformers for the analog and digital sections at a time when most manufacturers were still figuring out how to make CD playback work at all. It weighs significantly more than any CD player has a right to. It looks like an oversized black box from the early 80s. indistinguishable from a VCR. Working units sell for $250 to $600. If you've spotted one of these already, hit like, because the numbers are about to climb. Number 7. The Sony SSG7. A three-way floor-standing speaker from 1977 with a carbon fiber woofer, a real wood cabinet, and a crossover network built with components that Sony sourced from their professional monitor division. The G-Series was Sony's assault on the high-end speaker market, and the G7 was the flagship. It looks like a large, brown wooden box, which is exactly what people leave behind when they move. Speakers are heavy, awkward, and rarely worth hauling. Serviced pairs with original grills and intact surrounds sell for $600 to $1,500. The carbon fiber woofer cone is the tell. If the driver looks dark gray and woven rather than paper brown, stop. That's not a standard speaker. Number 6. The Sony PCM F1. This is a digital audio processor, and if you don't know what that means, that's precisely why these get thrown away. Released in 1981, the PCM F1 converted analog audio into a digital signal that could be recorded onto a standard Betamax or VHS videotape, effectively creating a portable digital recording studio years before DAT existed. Musicians and recording engineers used these to master albums. Ry Cooder recorded with one. It looks like a small silver box with unlabeled jacks on the back and no obvious purpose. Working units sell for $300 to $800. Complete setups with the matching Sony SL2000 portable Betamax deck command significantly more. Nobody at an estate sale knows what a PCM processor is. That's not an accident of the market. That's the market. Number 5. The Sony TCK777ES. Stereo Sound Magazine ranked the original TCK777 above the Nakamichi Dragon, the ZX9, and the 1000ZXL in 1983, which was an extraordinary thing to say about a company most audiophiles dismissed as a maker of nice Walkmans. The ES version added Dolby C to a machine that already had an encapsulated ribbon core transformer, a heavy-gauge steel frame with aluminum plates, dual mono circuit boards, a quartz-locked closed-loop dual capstan direct drive transport, and 3 individual calibration trim pots for bias and record level on each channel. Working units sell for $600 to $1,500. The ECI version has listed at close to $1,500 in Europe. The RM50 remote alone sells for $210. If the remote is in the drawer, do not sell it separately, and do not sell the deck without it. Number 4. The Sony TAN88. A power amplifier using pulse width modulation switching technology, released in 1977, decades before Class D amplification became standard in consumer audio. Sony built it with Sanken switching transistors and a design philosophy borrowed from industrial power engineering rather than traditional audio circuitry. It ran cooler, weighed less, and delivered power more efficiently than any conventional amplifier of the era. Nobody understood it. Reviewers didn't know how to evaluate it. It sold poorly and disappeared. The individual capacitors from this amplifier now sell for 19 to 59 euros a piece as collector parts, and the switching transistor power supply modules sell for 199 euros on their own. Complete working units are genuinely rare and command $400 to $1,000. Now pay close attention, because the last 3 are where the list stops being about interesting finds and starts being about the kind of money that changes your afternoon. Number 3. The Sony TAE900 and TAN900. The Esprit series. In the early 1980s, Sony created a separate high-end division and gave it a completely different visual language, with slim black chassis, minimal front panels, and internal construction that had more in common with laboratory instrumentation than home audio. The TAE900 preamplifier and TAN900 power amplifier were the top of that line. Sony built them in small numbers, sold them through a handful of specialty dealers, and never advertised them to the general public. Most Americans have never seen one. Complete pairs sell for $1,000 to $2,500. Individual pieces sell for hundreds. The word Esprit printed in small text on the faceplate is the collector tell, and it is easy to miss on a dusty component at an estate sale. Number 2. The Sony PSX800 Biotracer, the turntable from the opening story. Sony spent the 1970s refining speed accuracy and load resistance, then in 1980, attempted something nobody else has seriously tried. A turntable where the tone arm stays fixed and the platter moves. The Biotracer tone arm used electronic sensors in both the vertical and horizontal planes to damp resonance and maintain constant tracking force automatically, which means the stylus stays in the groove even if someone bumps the table. The plinth is resin-filled. The platter is heavy, and it looks, honestly, like a toy. Flat, plastic-cased, low-profile, nothing like the wood and chrome turntables collectors picture. One sold through a Goodwill auction site for $645 in unknown condition. Restored examples have listed in Europe at €1,150, and a fully working unit in the UK was recently listed at close to £2,500. The arm belts are the common failure point, and they're a cheap fix. Do not scrap a non-working one. Number 1. The Sony PSX9. Released in 1978 as Sony's cost-no-object statement turntable, the PSX9 was built with a magnesium alloy tone arm, a Biotracer electronic damping system, a massive direct-drive motor with quartz lock, and a plinth constructed from a composite material Sony developed specifically to eliminate resonance. It weighs over 80 pounds. It's shipped with a built-in moving coil head amplifier, which almost no consumer turntable ever offered. Sony produced it in extremely limited numbers, sold it primarily in Japan, and never seriously attempted to market it in the United States. Prices in the current market run from $5,000 for a working example into 5 figures for a mint one, with asking prices on the highest grade units reported in the low teens of thousands. It looks like a large, flat black slab with a tone arm on it. There is no visual signal, no chrome, no wood veneer, no branding drama. It looks like the kind of thing a family would leave behind in a basement because it's too heavy to move and doesn't look worth the effort. If you find one, do not plug it in, do not attempt to service it yourself, and above all, do not let anyone tell you it's just an old Sony turntable. Here's the pattern across all 10. Sony built 2 completely different companies inside one brand name. One made clock radios and televisions, the other made pulse-width modulation amplifiers, moving platter turntables, and cassette decks that outranked the Nakamichi Dragon. They both said Sony on the front, so before you list the rack as one lot, before you donate the whole shelf, before you let someone hand you $150 for 6 pieces, separate them, read every model number, look for the letters ES or the word Esprit, and check what each one sold for. Not listed, sold. If you've got old Sony gear at home, comment below and tell me the model numbers. I'd be happy to take a look. And if this changed how you think about that name on the faceplate, subscribe, because the collectors already know this list. Now you do too.